Thank you. Um, as Kitana mentioned, my name is Jamie Owens, and one of the application experts here at Imagine It. Today's session or webinar is on standardizing Revit content. A little background on myself. My background's in architecture. Practiced it for 10 years roughly. Between a couple different firms, joined ASI, now merged with Imagine It. Been in the AEC industry between training and Revit. So for about 13 years. But kind of what's today's objectives? So, in this webinar, we're going to go through, we're going to look at out of the box content and manufacturer content and how it works with our company standard schedules, and covering kind of the four main points that we have listed here: reviewing the content for the current parameters, replacing parameters within the content. How can we load bulk company standard parameters? It's a big challenge that we have a lot of times. And then in the end, bringing up that content up to new updated content for use in our project. Many times, a lot of companies start with Excel schedules, right? So this screenshot here is just it's an Excel table that we use just to populate information, and then we screenshot it or however we do it to get into our drawings, because a lot of times that challenge becomes of don't know how to create that, right? But it's the standard information that we need, that right, the standard and required information. And a lot of manufacturer content and out of the box content doesn't have this information that we have in there. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk today about how to get that information into those families that we're getting from manufacturers or out of the box. As we go, we can see here these are a couple of different manufacturers or out of the box content that they either have family parameters or non-company standard parameters in there that just don't work with our schedules. And so the biggest challenge we have is then what's the point of creating a schedule inside of Revit if I don't have that information? Well, the power is in the data. So what we want to do is talk about how do we get that communication between that content and our schedules and get that information up to date. We see here, looking at those schedules, having those standard parameters in our schedules that then we'll talk to our content, right? And then standardizing or upgrading that content to have those same parameters so that everything talks well, right? And one thing you'll see, we'll be using the Imagine Utilities for Revit family processor. This will help us in so many ways to get this information up to date. So I'm going to jump out of Excel here, out of PowerPoint, right? I moved too many things open here. There we go. And so we can see here, this is what would be our schedule looking like inside of Excel. Right, it's great, but let's go into Revit here. Get that open. There we go. Okay. Give a moment here for, I think, go to update. There we go. So inside of Revit, all right, I've kind of started out breaking this down a little bit. First of all, I have a couple different manufacturer VAV boxes, and you'll notice I'm going to kind of focus on the MEP a little bit. This concept will translate to architectural and structural in a similar fashions. But I have two VAV boxes here that I've downloaded from a manufacturer, right? From two different manufacturers. And they're both mechanical equipment, okay? So if I come up here and I go up to View and I go to Schedules, and I go to mechanical equipment, all right? So I'm trying to create this the schedule of my equipment. And first thing we'll notice as we go through here, there's a lot of parameters that are available to us. But one of the biggest challenges we have with getting content from different sources in different places, right? Again, from manufacturers or out of the box, is a lot of if they are shared parameters, if the content contains shared parameters, they are duplicates, right? So if I scroll down here, for example, I've got a number of poles here. I got two different number of poles from an electrical perspective in my content. Each family here has a different shared parameter, right? So if I schedule these, each one of these, schedule these in here, it will create that schedule, but they're not going to talk to one another because they are two different shared parameters, right? So that's one of our first challenges that we have is how do we get that content with that same parameter information, right? That's where standardized parameters, company standard parameters come into play. Okay, and we're going to see that here in a little bit. The other one that we have, the other way we see a lot of times is we have schedules that get created that we've created all the parameters as project parameters. If I come up here, go to manage, I go to my project parameters, right? We've just added all our parameters as project parameters. And while yes, that gets them into our schedule, and if I come up here and I go to my plan, right, and I bring in a family, just a regular old VAV family here, all right, I bring that family in, apologize for the upgrade. What we're going to find is that all those families that we created, or all of those parameters that we created, right, are now part of this mechanical equipment as well. So this is a VAV. This is for a roof. The schedule was for a rooftop unit. Okay, so all those parameters for that rooftop unit are now part of this VAV family. So using project parameters it works, and in many cases, in different disciplines that may work, it may be a viable option. But when you're working with categories that have such a broad spectrum, lighting or electrical, mechanical equipment, things like that, where we have certain parameters that need to be in certain pieces of equipment. So, for example, this VAV box here doesn't need every single one of these rooftop equipment parameters. While some of them may be functional, may be optional, we don't necessarily need to have all of these in there, in addition to anything that was already part of that content as well. So all we're doing is creating a lot more headaches for people that are using the model to populate the information. They're having to scroll through a lot more parameters in our content when we're adding them as project parameters. While yes, they are in here, they're in our schedule, we can see that in our schedule, we can see that information, and yes, I can populate that information in there. And that information now is tied to that equipment, that piece of equipment. But as I pick on that equipment, there's so much information, I just get information overload. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to start off with clean schedules that are, and then take our content and update our content to be more concise with that schedule. So I'm gonna close some windows here to hopefully help reduce some of the clutter we got going here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close these two down here and close those down. Okay. So what I have now is I have a schedule here that is, oh, I can see the audience view is lagging a little bit here. There we go. So what I have here is I have a standard schedule that I've created that has all the parameters in it. And if I look at these parameters, right, and I go to my fields, I look at these parameters, we'll see that these parameters are shared parameters, but they're not applied to all the categories. They're not applied to the category as a whole. So what that means is if I go up into manage and I go to project parameters, you'll see I don't have a long list of all these parameters in here. The benefit to this is when I go to my floor plan, right, and I insert I load a family in here, and I'm going to load in a out of the box family here. I'm going to go to systems, go to mechanical equipment. I'm going to place this piece of equipment in here. Okay, so this piece of equipment, this is an out of the box air handler unit, right? And it's got a lot of parameters that are in it. Now, you'll notice none of these parameters in my equipment or for my equipment is actually showing up on this piece of equipment. Okay, it's because they are all shared parameters that are specific to that schedule, and therefore they are only reading those parameters if the equipment or if the content that we've scheduling has them in it, right? So what that does is that helps our content become a little cleaner from the perspective I don't have all those extra parameters in there. Now, looking at it though, but how do I get that content in here? Well, this schedule has got a filter on it, right? So even if I took off that filter, right, so that content will show up, right? But if I start filling in the information or try to, you notice I still can't fill in that information, okay? We can't fill it in because that parameter does not exist in this out of the box family, okay? Now, that offers up a challenge of, well, how do I get this information, get those parameters into this out of the box content, right? So I'm going to go ahead and open up this family. Okay, so I'm inside this family here, and for those that have made content in the past, right, one of the ways that we can add parameters to our project is if we come up here to the 4 blue squares, right, and we can come down here and we can say create new parameter. We're going to make it a shared parameter. We're going to select it from our parameter file. All right, I'm going to choose one that's just let's see here. We'll just choose area building served parameter. Okay, and we're gonna add that parameter in. It's added up here. Okay, so now if I take that just that one instance, and one example, right, I'm going to go ahead and load this back into my project. I want to override it. Right, now if I select that content, right, I pick edit type because that was I set as a type parameter. That really should be an instance parameter for what it's used for. But the information is in there now. So now I can type in, let's see here, basement. That's the area or building being served as the basement. All right. So now if I come over here to my equipment, now that information is actually connected. That family parameter is not, or that family with that shared parameter is now connected to my schedule. The two are talking. Okay, that's great, but we have a lot of parameters in here, right? We have a lot of parameters that we need to add in, all right? So we come over here, we can come in here in our family, we can add one parameter at a time, all right? I can just say new parameter, all right? I can add it in one parameter at a time. Now, that's going to take a while, okay? There's also the need to, we need to swap out parameters, right? So a lot of out-of-the-box content, you'll see, even if I were to come in here to this my original schedule here, and I have this equipment in here, I go to fields. This is an out-of-the-box content, but you'll see I don't see voltage or number of poles or apparent load, right? I don't see a lot of information that's still available fields over here. And that's because if we go back to that content, I go to those parameters, okay? If I look at voltage, or I look at number of poles that are showing up here, right? And I pick my pencil, I can see these are just family parameters. And this is pretty common for out-of-the-box content many times, is that content is just a family parameter, contains family parameters. Now, we can use those family parameters to help drive information or help modify sizes and things like that, things that we don't need to schedule. But when we need to schedule that information or tag that information in our project, we need those parameters to be shared, right? So that's where the shared parameter option here, right, is important. Now I can come in here, and since I selected voltage here, I can pick my pencil, I can pick shared, pick select, all right, and I go to my shared parameters file, and I go to electrical. I'm going to go, I'm going to go to electrical loads and voltage. Okay, I can have that. I'm going to make it an instance parameter. It's going to be an electrical. All right, so I've swapped out that one parameter, and that works. And that is a viable option. We have to do that for every single one of the parameters that we want to swap out. Okay, so I could do that same thing for number of poles here. All right, I can come in here, shared parameter, select it again. Oh, call that one phases. Make it's an instance. All right, so we've created those two. Pick OK. Now when I load those back into my project, I'm going to overwrite the existing. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and look at my schedule. If I scroll all the way over my right-hand side here, we'll see that electrical information is now showing up in my schedule. That data is showing up that's in that content, right? If I select that content and look at electrical here, right? There's my phases, there's my voltage. Okay, so that works. That gets us the ability to replace those parameters, and but that's one at a time. Okay, if we're looking at this, that's a lot of parameters to have to come in here and select, pick the pencil, select shared, right? So this process is very tedious. That process can take quite a while to get done, right? But that is the process we need to do to standardize. We need to either swap out or add those additional parameters in. Well, I'm going to cancel here. I'm going to go ahead and cancel, close this here. Do I want to save this? No, I don't want to save that one this time. All right, I'm actually going to delete this, and we're going to purge that out of here. I want to do it a different fashion here. I'm going to delete this one out. All right, so I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to insert that original one. Again, that's not saved. All right, I'm going to go to systems and place that equipment. There it is. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to edit this family, and I'm going to come up here to the Imagine utilities. Right, so for those that don't have it, and our customer, please reach out. Imagine Utilities is very powerful for us, for you. When I say us, I mean designers. But it's a very powerful tool. It has many different tools for us to use. All right, so under Family Processor, right, this Family Processor helps with that parameter swap or parameter addition. Okay, this becomes very, very handy. So I'm going to come up here and go to my actions. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say replace parameters. Okay, so I can not only can I add my parameters, but I can use this to swap my help me swap my parameters. Now I know we still have to do it. We still have to swap those parameters. There's no way of getting around it. But with the Family Processor, I don't have to keep going in and picking the pencil, and picking shared, and picking select, and going through all of those different steps. What this tool does for us is it actually scans the file, scans that family for us, and lists all of the parameters that are currently in there, right? Whether it's a shared or it's a family parameter, it lists that parameter in here, okay? And then we can select it, for example, voltage, hold control, number of poles. I'm going to add selected parameters. So I'm going to add them down here to this list down here. Number of poles. I'm going to come in here, all right? And there's and now it's going to say replace with shared parameter. So it's reading the shared parameter file that's already associated, because that's the one I've been working in, and says, okay, there's a parameter that meets this parameter type. Let's use it. The same thing is going to happen for voltage. We're going to select it. All right. We have supply air outlet flow, supply air inlet flow, return air. Right. We're going to go ahead and swap these out too. All right. I'm going to go ahead and select all of those. I'm going to add them down here. All right. So I'm going to pick in here. Right. And it's going to read HVAC airflow. What do I have? All right. So return air. There we go. Supply air inlet. I'm going to use my outside air, my supply air outlet. It's going to be my supply air. Okay, so I have these five, right? Five parameters that were in the project or in the family, and they were family parameters. Now I'm going to swap them with my shared parameters. Now this process we just saw here is a lot easier than to do that one at a time. Okay, so I'm going to add this to my actions list. All right, so it's going to tell me, okay, do this. Now I have the option, I can run it on the current family, or if I have a bunch of families in a folder that all have that same number of poles, voltage, and return, supply, and air outlet parameters, I could process those. In this case here, I'm just going to run it on this one. Okay, so I'm going to say process families. So it'll give me a little message here, finish processing. Everything was successful, right? It's showing me green. Awesome. Close that, close the processor here. I'm actually going to come back up here, go to create, look at my parameters, and here they are. Unit power phases, voltage, right? Now, what it doesn't do is it doesn't change if I wanted it to be instance versus type, right? It doesn't swap that information. So I potentially would still need to modify if I needed to move it from type to instance. I still may need to make that modification to it. But at least it's swapping out those parameters. So I don't have to go to each one, go to select, browse through my shared parameters file, right? It's doing that for me. It's making that process a lot easier. Okay. So now I've added these 5 parameters. Okay. Now what about all my other parameters, right? So if I come back in here, go to my rooftop unit here, right? I have stuff for my supply fan, my exhaust fan, right? I have my weights, I have cooling capacities, right? I have a bunch of other parameters that I need. It's just inside of my content still. So let's go back to that, using that Imagine utility again, that family processor. This time I'm going to go to actions. I'm going to add shared parameters, right? I saw earlier while updating and standardizing that content, I can add those parameters in one at a time. Adding the shared parameters allows me to I still got to select which ones, but I can go through here and it already lists, right? I don't have to pick the new parameter and browse and do all that every single time. It lists all my shared parameters in my parameters file. Okay, so list them all in here. If they all go in, I can say select all and add selected parameters. All right. Now I go through here and I make that determination. All right, is this an instance information or is it a type information? What group do I want to add it to? Right, so I can come in here. All right, this is going to be under structural. All right, I can do a little search. All right, and so there's a lot of different categories in here. It reads all the categories that are available for organizing. Okay, so we just need to go through here and choose where do we want this information, right? So I'm going to go ahead and put this under identity data, voltage, all right, phases. They're already in there, but you notice it will still try to add them. Okay, so we would populate all this information as we need to. All right, so this exhaust fan up here, make that pop up. There we go. All right, we're going to put it under electrical. All right, that's fan control maybe. This needs to be electrical as well. So I just need to populate that information for whichever of these I need. Okay. Now I'm going to say, when I'm done, I'm going to say okay to add to actions list. Now, think of that. All these parameters here, we would have had to add one at a time inside of Revit, the family kind of traditional method, right? So that's bringing that content, that's adding these parameters, standard parameters, to this out-of-the-box content. Now, one of the powers of this is I can say, you know what? Let me save this. I can save this list here, right? And I'm gonna call it IT shared parameters for MEP content. Okay, it can be, so you're going to save it specifically for what you're going to use it for. Okay, because now what happens is I'm going to process this family. It's going to process. It's going to finish processing. It's going to show me the results. Right now, you notice it's got some that are failed. Okay, the reason why they're failing is because they're already added. They're already added shared parameters from our shared parameters file, right? They're the ones that we swapped out earlier that we replaced, right? So it's created all those. Let me close it. Let me close this here. All right, now I come in here and I can go to my create, go to my 4 blue squares, and you'll see, right, it's added the additional information. There's the exhaust fan, right? Everything else I left under other, so it's all falling under other. So that way we can kind of see it all grouped together. But it's filling in all that information now, right? So now I can pick OK. If I load that back into my project, existing version, I can go back in here, my schedule. Now that schedule reads that information that we added in, right? All those parameters are here. They're actually editable, right? So I can come in here and it's going to be 84, right? And because it's the type, it's going to give me that little alert there, but I can populate that information, okay? That's great. I got it. That's one, but right, this standard schedule, right? I have a new project. I got a new piece of equipment that I need to load in, right? So I'm going to insert, I'm going to load my family. All right, I'm going to pull in a new unit, okay? New manufacturer content here, something from the manufacturer, it's a little different. New project, new design, but the same schedule. All right. I'm going to go to my plan as soon as it's done looking. Systems, I'm going to place that equipment. All right. It's great, but I'm back to square one. None of my content, none of my parameters are working with my schedule again. Okay. So let's open up that content. Open. There we go. We're going to edit that family again. All right. Got that new piece of equipment. All right, for this project. All right. Now I don't want to have to go through and add all those parameters one at a time again. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use the Imagine and the family processor here, and I'm actually going to do my replace those parameters. So I'm going to find the ones that I do need to swap out, right? So things like, right, the horsepower or supply fan phases, or if there's a voltage, right? So anything that I need to swap out that is already in here, right? This is already a parameter. So total supply airflow. Right, I'm going to go ahead and add that one. I'm going to go ahead and use my supply fan voltage, add that one, supply fan phase, right? So depending on what we're doing, we may need to swap out more or less depending on that content, where we're getting it from, right? And I can do that swap process, right? And this is going to be total supply airflow, so supply airflow. This is my voltage. I'm going to use my voltage. This is my phases. All right, so I'm going to add those in. I'm going to process those, and it's going to complete that. All right, so let's swap those out. But now I got all my other standard parameters that I need to get in here. All right, I already spent the time developing that actions list before, right? When we did the add shared parameters, I spent that time adding in all those actions of what was this parameter, right? So adding this shared parameter and doing all that information. I've done that once, right? So now I can go back here to my processor. I can say open actions list. Let me clear what's there first, open it. Here's that shared parameter, open that one. So there's all these parameters again. Okay, so we've taken that list we've already set up and created. I just reloaded it, right? I've reloaded that actions. All right, so I'm going to process it. And it's going to show me the two that failed because the two that I swapped out already. But now this content is brought up to my standard for my schedule. It has my parameters that I need for my schedule. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to load it back into the project. Okay. All right. I'm going to override it. And now that information is ready to go. So not only did I have a new project with a totally different piece of equipment that's for a rooftop unit, but I was able to use that same routine to add that content back in, those parameters back in to meet my standard schedule, right? So whether that is out of the box content, whether that's manufacturer content, right? Both of those contents either come with family parameters or their own custom shared parameters, but they're not going to work in your standard schedule most of the time. So we're going to have to go through and swap out those parameters and then add those additional parameters to get that to work with your content. Once we create that routine, that actions list with that family processor, we can push those in really quick and easy into multiple different pieces of equipment, and it'll be ready to go. It'll be ready to work with our schedules. Okay. Now, I'm going to close this file here. All right, look at this schedule. Now, one of the things that I always do for my standard schedule to help me create a standard piece of content that I can have ready to go, right? Every schedule I make, I always make a template family for, right? And what that does is that's going to help me create that standard content down the road. So the same way I would come up here, I would go to my new family. I'm going to choose my mechanical equipment. Right. And this is where now we've created that actions list by creating the other content. But when we make our schedule and we're making this kind of placeholder family, template family, we can create that actions list at that same time to bring in those parameters that we're going to need. And so now when I process it, all right, I'm going to close. All right, this template, this little family here has all those parameters in it. Now, if this is a blank family, all right, so this will be used for making, if we were making one from scratch, right? Well, we would save this file here, file, save as, family, all right? And we just save it to wherever. So it'd be rooftop unit, MEP equipment. Family, template. Okay. So now I have that created. And so when I go to need a new piece of equipment that I can't find, I have this family created with all my parameters and stuff that I need in it. But when we're setting this up, that's when we can create that actions list to be able to add that to our out of the box content. or our additional content that may be coming from a manufacturer. Okay. So in closing, manufacturer content, out of the box content, is going to have an array of parameters, whether family or shared, that they're not going to work with your schedule. Right? They're not going to work with your standard schedules that you've created. Right? You've created these standard schedules based upon Excel, AutoCAD, whatever you've done before, right? We've created these to read that data, to have that data in there that you need. So you need that content to work with it. Now, if we do everything as project parameters, as I showed before, then it adds it to all the content that we loaded in, all the mechanical equipment content, for example, right? Whether it's a VAV or a rooftop unit, it's going to add all those parameters to it. And that just creates headaches for users. So creating the standard schedule and then taking that content and swapping those parameters and adding those parameters will help standardize that content for your projects. Now, if it's a piece of equipment that you use on a regular basis, right? Maybe this is the standard piece of equipment that you use all the time, right? Once you've saved that, once you've done those routines and swap out those parameters to get it to work with your schedule, save that content, right? So come up here, do a save as family, right? Save that content to, right, rooftop unit, chilled water equipment, right? Save that content so that you can easily use again and again and again. Okay. Kitana, are there any questions out there? I'm sure there's an array that maybe have come through.
Yeah, let me take a peek.
Okay.
Is it possible to do vertical schedules?
Do vertical schedules. So from a schedule perspective, the fields are always going to be horizontal going across. Your content or your line items will always be vertical from that perspective.
Okay. Is there a way to do this without a third-party program?
Dynamo, it's still third party, it's essentially, but that the parameter swapping and the batch loading is only available, yeah, through that third party. If you can do it one at a time. So as I was showing here, right, I can come up here and I can add a parameter in one at a time. That is doable, but you're not going to be able to batch load natively in Revit.
Okay. Let's see. If you mess up, can you undo an action?
So if you mess up, you can undo what you just did. If they're talking about if there's an action that we've add a shared parameter, right? So if we added this one in here and we didn't mean to, we can always just delete that parameter out, right? So if we accidentally add one in that we didn't want to, we can come in here and just say, select it, delete it. And it's just going to take it out of the family.
Okay. How do we remove duplicate parameters?
So if you're having duplicate parameters early on, and let me open up my one that had the duplicates in it, boop, 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 boop. But can't find the file I saved earlier. So if you get if you get into a project that has multiple voltages or multiple number of poles, for example, right? That's because there are two pieces of equipment, or whatever category you're scheduling, there are two families that are coming from different sources that both have shared parameters that are different shared parameters. Okay, shared parameters are unique in the fact that they are stored into a text file that uses this long code right here to identify it. The name duck return with is just for us layman users to read and see. This code right here is what Revit is identifying as. So if this code is different, right? So if we have two duck return widths showing up, is because they are using two different codes. They were developed by two different shared parameters. And the only way to get rid of that is to use your shared parameter and swap them out in both of those so that they read as one. So you can you would just go in and select the one you want and pick the pencil and swap it out for your standard shared parameter.
Okay. Does any of this work with Revit LT, or is it only for full Revit?
Unfortunately, so the process of doing it manually is available in Revit LT. Now, Revit LT doesn't offer mechanical systems, but from the components perspective, it has the capabilities. As far as using the add-in, unfortunately, Revit LT does not support add-ins, so that would not be available. So you could do it, but you'd have to do it manually. You would still want to do it. Unfortunately, it just takes a little longer because you're going to have to swap those out one at a time or add them in one at a time.
Okay. One question that I'll answer is, are you going to have another seminar on the other Imagine It tools? Yes, we do have several of them being scheduled right now, and they'll be posted to our events page, and they'll be live shortly. Another question is, how do we get Imagine It tools? Can you touch on that?
How do you get the Imagine It tools? So as an Imagine It customer, you have access to them. If you reach out to our support team, they will be able to get you access to them. support@rand.com is the email address for that. So you'd be able to access those, or reach out to your sales rep that has those. They'd be able to work with you to get that. If you're not an Imagine It customer, you can still purchase the tool separately, and you'd have to reach out to one of our salespeople. I don't know that cost or process or anything like that.
Okay. Can I add parameter data to all types of families at once?
Add parameter data to all types of families at once. Not quite sure of the question. We can add the parameters. If we add the parameter, we can, in a project, we can add it to all the categories, which becomes a project parameter, but then that becomes a bigger challenge. If you're talking about in here and needing to add, for example, the unit power voltage parameter at the family level, if you do it one at a time, you can only add it once. If you use the Imagine It family processor, there is the ability to, when you process, to select multiple families. And you can say select families, and then you can go through and select what families, what directory in families you want that to process on. So if you have a folder that has 3 mechanical equipment rooftop units, you can process that all at one time.
Next question, can this be used for panel board schedules?
Panel board schedules, nope, so panel board schedules are a little different because they use panel schedule templates, which are different than uh, schedule quantity schedules. So they function completely different. So yep, so that unfortunately would not work for a panel board schedule.
Okay. Is Imaginet option is available for all Revit versions? So is this available for all Revit versions?
The add-in is available for, I'm in 2021, and it goes back several releases. The family processor, I think, stops at 16. I think it's as old as it goes back to. Autodesk currently supports 2021 and 3 back. So Autodesk technically only supports 18, 19, and 20 at this point. But I think the processor goes back to 17 or 16.
Okay. The template family you made with all parameters already in it was not a true template, correct? It was a family?
So yes, it is just a family. I'll open that up here. And so while yes, that is, oh, that's not the right one I wanted. It was, all my looking like on my folder here. Oh, I think I got the wrong folder. Apologize, trying to find on my other screen my folder here where all my, there it goes. I knew I was missing a bunch of stuff. So while that template is just an RFA, okay, so it is a Revit family. If I right click on it, I can rename it, and I can actually rename this to an RFT, which is a Revit family template. And so when I do so, Windows knows it's a Revit family template now. And so when I come in, I go to File, New, Family, I can actually browse to that. Let me find out. Let me browse over here to that. There we go. And there's that family template. So while it's not a true template in the save, you can always open and do a save as. It is a Revit family. Or if you really want, you can rename the file extension and make that a Revit family template that then you can use, much like creating new content, using out of the box templates as well.
Okay. Where are the shared parameters saved when the project is closed?
So the shared parameters are stored within the project itself. They're just kind of hidden behind the scenes in the programming. So once I've added them, that shared parameter to my schedule, for example, here, this area, IT area building served parameter, right? So it's loaded in here. It's just stored inside the project. If I need to, if when I go to make a shared parameter, it's going to make it in a shared parameters file. And that's what I was showing earlier here. Oh, I closed it. Let me open it back up again. That's what's being stored here. This is the shared parameters file. So a company should have one standard shared parameters file that will use that everybody will use to create content from. And with that, so when I go to create a new one for a new shared parameter, for example, right, I'm going to come up here and go to manage, go to my shared parameters, right? It's going to read that file. And when I create a new parameter, I'm creating it in that file, that shared parameters file, it's a TXT file that's stored wherever you want to store it. And then you will add that to your project here. So if I'm going to create a new one here, I'll just do a text one and just call it a test text. All right. And so I added it to my construction here, and shared parameters, they're a little different than family parameters for the fact that you can't modify them or anything like that. But now that file is stored, right? So if I were to open up that shared parameters file again, right, it would be stored and saved in that location. So if I were to just open up that shared parameters file, scroll through here, and here it is listed down here. All right, so there's that file. So that's stored for everybody to use. Then if I want to add it to my schedule, for example, I'm just going to add shared parameter. Here it is listed, right? So once I've created that and added it to the schedule, it's part of this project. It lives in this project. It doesn't need that shared parameters file anymore, from the sense that it's there. Now you need that shared parameters file because you need to be able to use that same shared parameter to create your content with. But as far as in the project, it lives nested inside the project. It's baked in.
Wonderful. Am I understanding correctly that this maps the replaced parameters to connectors?
So that is assuming that they are already mapped to the connector. So if I select this connector here and I go to my voltage, right, it already has the parameter there. All we are doing is replacing the generic voltage parameter with our standard voltage parameter. So it's not manually, it's not automating the mapping or the association of the parameter to the connector. That process you still have to do when you build your content, or the manufacturer does when they build their content. This just gives the ability to swap out manufacturer parameters or out of the box parameters with your standard parameters so that it functions with your schedule.
Let's see, we can take one more question. How do we make a shared parameter file and share that between users and projects?
So when you go to create a shared parameters, whether you're in a project or you're in a family like this here, under the Manage tab, shared parameters, right? You pick that, you're going to pick Create. It's going to ask you where do you want to save it, right? You just save it to where you want to save it, right? So we'll call this company A shared parameters, right? So it's going to create that shared parameters file, and wherever you save that at, right? So I recommend that going onto a secure server in your standards directory with your standards template, things like in those places where it's secure, where limited people have read-write access to that. They can read it, but they can't, and not everybody can write to it, so that you don't overwrite it. And then you go from here and you start building the group to help organize that shared parameter file. Then you create those parameters, right? So like electrical is the group, and then I create my parameter that I need, right? So maybe it's going to be number of poles, and so it's this company A underscore number of poles. So then it creates that. And then we can use that shared parameters file in here in our project, or in this case, the family here. It's going to read that. Okay. All good questions.
So we have quite a few more, but we're at the top of the hour, so we will address them offline and send you emails. This webinar is being recorded, so we will post it and send you all a copy as soon as it's been processed. And thank you so much for attending, and thank you, Jamie, for presenting.
No problem. Thank you.